sound of a slap rang out like a gunshot in the courtroom. Officer Dana Klein stood tall, lips curled in disgust. "Don't test me," she hissed. Judge Maya Reynolds, barely 30 and dressed in plain civilian clothing beneath her robe, didn't flinch. A red mark bloomed across her cheek, but her gaze never wavered. Gasps echoed from a few courtroom spectators. One bailiff froze. Another officer chuckled. Dana's partner, Officer Lee, looked on smugly. "You people always want special treatment," she muttered. Maya calmly adjusted her sleeve. A silver emblem, barely visible, glinted from beneath the fabric. They didn't see it. Yet. Because what they thought was weakness was power in disguise. And the woman they just struck. She was about to end their careers without raising her voice. As we delve into the story, if you believe everyone should be treated with respect, no matter what their color is, click the subscribe button now and tell us where you're watching from. This story delivers the most powerful instant karma you've never seen coming this year. Maya Reynolds never liked being underestimated, but she had learned to use it. In Eastwood, where police sirens howled more than lullabies and justice often skipped corners, Maya's sharp mind grew in the shadows. Her mother stitched wounds in night shifts. Her father served 7 years for a crime he didn't commit. That courtroom silence, the one that swallowed his cries, never left her. It became fuel. Years later, after graduating from Yale Law and becoming the youngest judge in the Ninth Circuit Superior Court, Maya still walked quietly. Not to be invisible, but to observe. Her power wasn't in what she wore, but in what she withheld. Today, in a courtroom where she'd ruled before, she entered in soft heels, a plain coat, and no introduction. She wanted to see what the system did when it forgot who she was. Officer Dana Klein didn't care for subtlety. Built like a boulder and twice as blunt, her buzz-cut and perfectly pressed uniform carried the air of someone who believed power was proven by volume. With the right crowd, she softened, polite to prosecutors, deferential to judges who looked the part. But her cruelty was selective. Her voice sharpened when speaking to those she deemed lesser. Her partner, Officer Lee Monroe, preferred quieter digs, rolled eyes, clipped smirks, and a practiced indifference that hurt more than open aggression. Together, they policed not just people, but who they believed belonged. The room reflected them. Bailiff Joel had shaken the hand of White Attorney Evans as he passed. "Welcome back, counselor," he beamed. When Maya entered moments later, he gave only a nod, quick and unsure. A black clerk nearby wasn't acknowledged at all, and from the gallery a teenage Latina girl shrank slightly as the two officers walked past. She didn't know Maya, but she recognized the tension. She'd seen that look before from authority, not one of law, but of judgment. In this space, appearance wrote the rules, and Maya once again had chosen not to read from their script. Have you ever felt misjudged before people even knew who you were? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Your story matters too. The courtroom air thickened as Officer Dana Klein's boots echoed down the center aisle, each step deliberate, territorial. "Rules are rules," she barked, eyes narrowing on Maya, who remained seated near the bench, but her voice betrayed her. It wasn't about the rules, not really. The rules only seemed to apply to certain people. Klein hadn't asked Maya for ID. Didn't ask her why she was sitting in a reserved section. She didn't question. She concluded. And her conclusion was clear. Maya didn't belong. "You need to leave the bench area," Klein ordered, standing tall. "This space is for court officials only." "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," Maya responded, her tone calm and even. Klein's brow twitched. "Don't get smart. Let's not make this worse." Behind her, Officer Lee Monroe crossed her arms, her stance wide, ready to escalate. It was all performance now, dominance masquerading as duty. Attorney Evans looked up briefly from his notes. No protest, no surprise, just a passing glance before returning to his paperwork. The teenage girl in the back row hesitated, her hand hovering over her phone. She sensed what was happening, but didn't know what to do with it. Whispers began, soft at first, then sharper. Who is she? Doesn't look like any judge I've seen. Probably one of those protesters trying to make a point. The judgments weren't whispered to protect Maya. They were whispered to protect themselves from what they didn't understand. You have 5 seconds to step down, Klein said, voice louder now, hand drifting toward her baton, or we remove you by force. The threat wasn't for safety. It was for show. Bailiff Joel stepped forward, uncertainty in his eyes. Maybe we should double-check before... We're trained, Klein interrupted coldly. We know how to spot a fraud. Joel stopped. His mouth closed. His instincts had no rank here. Maya rose slowly. Her eyes, calm and cutting, met Klein's. Think carefully about what you're doing. There was no fear in her voice, no plea, just a warning, a quiet chance for redemption, and they ignored it. What would you do if someone challenged you publicly based only on assumption? Drop your response in the comments. And if you believe silence can hold more power than shouting, hit like and subscribe. You were warned, Klein snapped, stepping closer now. Her voice ricocheted off the courtroom walls, louder, colder, meant to echo long after the words faded. You're refusing to comply with a direct order. Her hand hovered near her belt, theatrics designed for dominance. Lee mirrored the act, adjusting her utility belt with slow precision, flanking Maya like a prison guard, not a peacekeeper. This wasn't about order. This was about reminding everyone who they thought held the power. The room went silent, real silent. Paper rustled once, then stopped mid-turn. The gallery stiffened. Eyes darted, but no one moved. The air changed, denser, heavier, waiting. Not even the judge's nameplate dared speak for her. People weren't siding with Maya. They were waiting for her to fold, for her to confirm the unspoken rule that silence meant submission, not strength. I've done nothing wrong, Maya said, her voice like still water, level and deep. She wasn't begging. She wasn't arguing. She was clarifying. Calm scared them, and her refusal to tremble made them twitch. Then, without fanfare, she reached into her coat pocket and touched a button on her wristwatch. Subtle, deliberate. The action seemed harmless, routine. But those who paid attention noticed its precision. It didn't feel like fear. It felt like control. Still, no one in the room understood what had just been triggered. The teenage girl near the back leaned forward. Her hand gripped her phone, thumb hovering over the camera icon. But her mother touched her arm, shaking her head. Don't get involved, she whispered. Let it go. The girl hesitated, then lowered her phone, torn between fear and what felt right. And then came the murmurs. Why won't she just follow instructions? Is she trying to get arrested? Probably doesn't even belong here. Each voice built a wall, not of law, but of assumption, the kind that suffocates truth before it can speak. Maya didn't answer. She heard every whisper, every judgment wrapped in politeness. Still, she stayed rooted, her chin lifted, eyes locked on the officers. She wasn't silent because she was small. She was silent because she was ready. From the far side of the gallery, a young clerk leaned forward and whispered, "Are you okay?" The words floated, almost lost. Maya offered the smallest nod, acknowledgement, without breaking gaze. Her composure held the room hostage. "Don't encourage the disruption," Lee snapped, her voice sharper than ever. "Eyes forward," Klein barked behind her. "No one's above the law." Their voices grew, not out of confidence, but desperation. They were shouting to prove they still held the center. Klein turned toward the gallery. "This is your final warning," she announced. "If she doesn't comply, she will be detained." A beat, then a scoff. Some people always play the victim. a young man muttered near the back, just loud enough. Laughter flickered in the rows like a cruel flame. The pile-on began. She's being difficult. She's asking for it. Just follow the rules. What's so hard about that? The same voices that cheered fairness now hissed compliance. It was easier than facing their own quiet prejudice. Bailiff Joel opened his mouth again. Maybe we should... Klein shut it down instantly. You're not in charge here. His lips closed. The conflict inside him simmered, but he stepped back into the safety of silence. The teenage girl leaned forward again, this time bolder. She scribbled something on a bright pink sticky note and passed it along the gallery until it reached Maya's side. Maya glanced, only for a second. The note read, "They don't know who you are, do they?" She didn't react. She didn't need to. She just tucked it into her sleeve with care, as if it were part of her ritual. Klein's boots moved again, closer this time. Her hand rested on the baton at her side. This is not a debate. This is an order. Her voice cracked, ever so slightly. Lee returned with coffee cups, 3, neatly arranged. She passed them to the court reporter, to Counselor Evans, to Joel. Each smiled, nodded, thanked her, quietly. Maya? Nothing, not even a glance. She was invisible by design, but not for long. Would you stay calm, or speak out, when the world turns silent around you? Comment below, and hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone. Klein brushed past Maya without warning, then stopped, turned, and drove the corner of her heavy folder into Maya's shoulder. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't accidental. The blow wasn't enough to hurt, but it was more than enough to humiliate. Watch where you're standing, Klein hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. You're obstructing court business. Boo. She wanted the room to see it. To see Maya as less. Lee Monroe stepped in without missing a beat, her voice cutting and smug. See what happens when people think they're above the law? She spoke like Maya had earned it. Maya stood still. Silent. Calm. That composure, the quiet refusal to break, only made them angrier. Maya turned her head slowly. Her voice was low and unshaken. I've only ever asked for equal treatment. The courtroom seemed to inhale. The sentence didn't rise. It landed, and it hit something deeper. Lee's face went still. Klein's jaw clenched tight. Then Klein snapped. Her hand shot upward, fast and reckless. The slap struck across Maya's face like a whip, echoing sharp against the marble walls. For a second, time broke. Gasping erupted in waves. One of the attorneys knocked over his chair. Bailiff Joel's pen hit the floor. No one expected that line to be crossed. What the hell? Someone yelled. The teenage girl stood, trembling. She hit her? Maya turned her face back slowly. Her cheek flushed red, but her gaze steady. You just made a mistake you'll regret, she said. Soft. Inevitable. Like a door closing. When someone stays calm under pressure. Do you think it's weakness or strategy? Comment with your take. Maya stepped into the center of the courtroom slowly, deliberately. Her shoulders square, her chin lifted, not in defiance, but in resolve. The slap still echoed in the minds of those watching, but her silence now drowned it out. She stood tall, her voice soft, yet it rippled through the chamber like thunder. I've tolerated enough, she said. The room didn't move, but Officer Klein did, barely, a half step back. So small most wouldn't notice, but Maya did. So did Lee, and the energy shifted. You're the one causing issues, Klein fired back, though the venom in her voice sounded thin now, unsure. This was your choice. But it was defensive, not dominant. Lee straightened her back and looked toward Klein, her stance a question. Even she felt it now. Something had cracked. The surety they carried minutes ago no longer filled the room. Maya didn't bother to reply. She simply turned and looked to the corner of the courtroom where a black dome camera hung like a quiet sentinel. She stared at it for 2 long seconds, then back at Klein, and smiled, not wide, not smug, but with the kind of knowing that causes unease in the guilty. Klein's mouth tightened. Just outside the courtroom, a clerk sat at a terminal, fingers flying. She had seen everything from the start, and now she quietly activated a secondary courtroom stream. A live feed from the bench's side camera began uploading to the Ninth Circuit's internal review platform. It wasn't just Maya who was watching now. A higher level had been notified. Back inside, Klein squinted. "What are you doing?" she barked. "Who did you just signal?" Her voice, louder than before, bounced with fear disguised as fury. "Answer me." But Maya didn't answer. That silence unnerved her more than any argument would have. From the gallery, the teenage girl who had watched quietly leaned toward her neighbor. "She's not afraid of them," she whispered. Her voice barely carried, but it was enough. "She knows something." The woman beside her nodded once, slowly. Others in the room, hearing the shift in tone and posture, began to feel it too. Maya's voice sliced through the tension. "This isn't about rules," she said clearly, her eyes never leaving Klein. "This is about respect and how you decide who deserves it." The words landed like a gavel, dead center. A few people turned in their seats, finally, to look directly at the officers. Behind Maya, Officer Lee muttered under her breath. Should have known she was going to be one of those. She meant it to herself, but a microphone on the clerk's desk was still live, unmuted. The courtroom wasn't quiet anymore. It was listening. Several people froze. One man turned his head sharply. The attorney in the third row sat back, lips parted in surprise. They'd all heard it. And so did the recording. The silence that followed wasn't still. It was suffocating. The soundless weight of realization, heavy and impossible to ignore. You could hear the scratch of a chair leg, the click of a shoe against tile. One of the court-appointed attorneys cleared his throat and looked down. The moral math was shifting. No one stepped forward for the officers now. Maya tilted her head slightly to the side, calm as ever. "You're right," she said gently, like someone finishing a thought long overdue. "Actions do have consequences." There was no sarcasm in her voice, only precision, finality. She didn't have to raise her voice, because the next sound said it all. The rear courtroom door clicked. Hinges moved. Someone important had arrived. Klein turned to look, then turned back quickly, but the fear had already registered. The game was no longer in her hands. She didn't know who had come through that door, but she knew what it meant. And the power in the room had already left her. Maya didn't need to say another word. When someone stays calm under pressure, do you think it's weakness or strategy? Comment with your take and hit like and subscribe button. The room froze. No one moved. Even the air seemed to pause mid-breath. Maya reached into her bag, slow and composed, and placed a sealed leather folder on the judge's bench. No fanfare, no defiance, just precision, intent. Officer Klein's jaw tensed. "What exactly are you doing?" she demanded, her voice tighter than before, less steel, more static. Maya didn't answer. She adjusted the folder slightly, lining it square. Then, without lifting her gaze, she tapped a button on her watch. A faint chime followed. From the back of the courtroom came measured footsteps, each one heavier than the last. Klein glanced toward the sound, but Maya spoke first, quiet, unwavering. "You'll understand soon enough." It wasn't a threat. It was time running out. The room had shifted, and suddenly the badge no longer held the center. What will you do differently if you are Maya? Hit like, and don't forget to subscribe. "What's happening?" someone whispered near the back row, leaning in to get a better look. Why isn't she scared? The fear that had once surrounded Maya had shifted, gone soft around the edges, replaced by something else. The tension wasn't rising anymore. It was unraveling, and in its place came something sharper, recognition. At the clerk's table, a young intern who had remained silent all morning leaned forward. Her pen slipped from her hand as she stared at Maya with new eyes. All this time, she had thought the woman sitting there was cornered. But now, her calm looked less like restraint and more like command. A realization settled in. Maya wasn't holding back because she was intimidated. She was holding back because she was waiting. The side door to the courtroom opened with a smooth, mechanical hiss. Heels clicked softly against polished marble. In walked a woman in a dark tailored suit, her stride confident, her badge gleaming on her hip. Deputy Attorney General Carmen. Brooks didn't speak right away. She didn't need to. Her presence said everything. Her gaze scanned the room and landed on Maya with subtle warmth. She gave a small nod, one only meant for equals. Judge Maya Reynolds, Brooks announced, her voice calm but firm. Your request for observation today was approved and confirmed. The air shifted instantly. A collective intake of breath swept the courtroom. Chairs creaked as people leaned forward, stunned. Gasps followed. Soft, unsure, but real. I knew it, someone whispered near the gallery. She was the judge, all along. Another voice echoed. That's why she didn't flinch. She was never afraid. Maya turned to face the courtroom at last. The robe was gone, but the authority was unmistakable. I came in plain clothes today, she began, not to hide, but to see. Her eyes swept the room slowly. When justice wears robes, it's easy to respect. But what about when it wears skin you don't value? The silence that followed wasn't stunned. It was heavy with guilt. Officer Klein blinked rapidly, her shoulders suddenly smaller. Her grip loosened around her baton. Officer Lee stepped slightly behind her, color draining from her face. The courtroom's center of power had moved, and they were no longer standing in it. They hadn't just disrespected a woman. They had struck the Ninth Circuit's youngest, sitting judge. Brooks raised her hand without hesitation. Effective immediately, all court operations are paused. I'm invoking Article 3 to 14. An internal investigation begins now. The order wasn't up for debate. The gallery began murmuring again, not in mockery, but in realization. A reckoning was beginning. Maya stepped back, letting the moment breathe. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't gloat. She let the system she had upheld now correct itself. Justice, for once, was unfolding in real time. The door opened again. 2 officers from Internal Affairs entered briskly, their tablets already on and body cams flashing red. They walked straight to Klein and Lee. Please remain where you are, one said. Calm, professional, but firm. Maya turned to Klein, her voice finally directed at the woman who had slapped her. You chose to lead with ego, she said. That ends today. The words weren't sharp, but they cut deeply. Klein's eyes darted. She was no longer in control of the room, or of herself. The gallery shifted, heads nodded. A clap rang. Out from the back. Then another. Slowly, others followed. A quiet swell of support. No cheers, just acknowledgement. The kind Maya had earned in silence. You saw someone who didn't match your idea of power, she said, turning to address the whole room. And you showed the world what unchecked authority looks like. Her voice didn't shake. It commanded, not from rank, but from truth. Lee scanned the room, desperate to find someone, anyone, to meet her eyes. Joel looked away. Evans didn't budge. Even their own captain, who had slipped in quietly moments earlier, stood in the back with arms crossed. The isolation was loud. Klein took a step back toward the courtroom exit, voice barely above a whisper. I think I need to call my union. One of the Internal Affairs officers moved calmly to block her path. Please remain seated, he said. You'll have that opportunity soon. Brooks didn't blink. You are hereby suspended, she said, with clinical precision. Effective immediately, pending full departmental review. And then came the echo Maya had waited for. And in accordance with state policy on judicial interference, Brooks added, You will also be cooperating with a civil misconduct probe. Klein's mouth parted. This wasn't personal, she said, voice shaking. I didn't know. She didn't look like... She stopped herself. Too late. Far too late. Maya stepped forward, her voice cool and steady. It became personal when you made it public. Her gaze didn't waver. She wasn't angry. She wasn't emotional. She was finished. She turned to face the gallery, addressing them, not as a victim, but as a judge. To everyone who witnessed today's events, she said clearly, I thank you for your patience. I'm sorry justice had to take this detour to get here. And then, for the first time since entering, Maya looked directly at the teenage girl who had handed her the sticky note. A small nod. You were brave, she whispered. The girl beamed, her face lighting up with something more powerful than applause, recognition. Maya walked slowly toward the courtroom doors. No one spoke, no one moved, because something had changed, not just in the room, not just in Klein or Lee, but in the air, in the belief of who justice could look like. The courtroom didn't return to normal. It never would, because silence that day had spoken loud enough to rewrite the rules. Should people who abuse their power be forgiven, or should they face the full consequences? Drop your take in the comments, and if this story hit you, like and subscribe. After the courtroom emptied, the teenage girl remained seated, gripping her phone tightly as if letting go would make the moment disappear. People filed out in murmurs, some embarrassed, others enlightened. Maya walked with quiet grace toward the rear exit, her coat still draped across her arm, her presence unchanged, but newly recognized. The girl hurried to her feet and followed. Outside, beneath the marble, pillars, she hesitated, then stepped forward. Thank you, she said, voice small but steady. I didn't know people like you existed. Maya smiled, warm and unshaken. You do now, she said, and one day someone will say the same about you. By sunset, the moment had reached beyond courthouse walls. A short video clip. No edits, no filter, began to circulate. The sound of the slap, the shift in silence, the unflinching reveal. The caption was simple. She never raised her voice, but she raised the standard. Thousands of comments poured in within hours. This is what quiet strength looks like. Judges like her are the future. She made justice feel human again. Maya didn't respond to the posts. She didn't need to. Her actions had already said more than any press release ever could. Still, when the cameras finally turned toward her days later, Maya stood behind the podium in her full robe. Her voice, calm as always, met the room without force. Respect should never be conditional, she began. It should not depend on appearance, tone, age, or color. Everyone deserves dignity, especially those underestimated before they even speak. Her eyes scanned the crowd, lingering on the front row where young faces leaned in, taking notes, recording more than words. To anyone watching who's ever been dismissed, she said, gaze piercing through the lens, stay grounded. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard, and you don't need to prove you belong. They just need to learn how to see you. Weeks later, Maya entered another courthouse, this time as a guest speaker for a law clerk training. She wore jeans and a soft grey tee beneath her blazer. No robe, no introduction. And still, the bailiff at the door stood tall and smiled. Good morning, Your Honor, he greeted without pause or question. There was no scan, no assumption, just welcome. That afternoon, seated behind an unfamiliar bench, Maya opened her worn leather notebook. Inside, etched faintly into the first page, was a message she'd written years ago. Sometimes, the smallest shifts become the biggest legacies. She traced the words with her finger and closed the book with a quiet nod. Her legacy had already begun, long before anyone else knew her name. If this story reminded you that dignity belongs to everyone, not just the powerful, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that message. What lesson stood out most to you? Let us know below.